Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 92, recording on Thursday, June 19th. The guest for you today is Matt Schneidman. We've had him on the podcast before. He covers the Packers alongside me at The Athletic. Does a great job, has covered the team for a long time, is very plugged in to that building. I recently talked to Kevin Fishbane, who covers the Bears for us. He gave us a good primer on the Bears. Felt like, this time of year, it's pretty quiet. What are the conversations going on in other buildings kind of around the league? So, thought, checking in on the Packers, having a feel for where they are, the optimism that they have, getting a lens on the enemy. I always enjoy doing that. So it's pretty Packers heavy. But think you guys who are locked in or curious about how this division is going to shake out will enjoy the conversation. So appreciate, Matt hopping on, and we'll get to that conversation very, very quickly. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Really would appreciate it. If you're listening on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeart, Podbean, Pocket Cast, wherever, Overcast, whatever, wherever you get your podcast, you can rate, review, subscribe. All that stuff helps us out. So we really, really appreciate it. I mean, we're coming up on a year of this podcast being a thing. Again, episode 92. So just grateful really for all you guys that pay attention, I was getting a haircut earlier today. There was a guy named Alex who said he listened to the podcast. And no, I'm not just making that up, even though it would be pretty savvy of me to do. But Alex, thanks for saying something. Appreciate you watching, you listening. Never take it for granted. If you missed out, we had some stories at The Athletic. Story earlier this week on a local agent and kind of navigating the current business dynamics of being an agent with college football and all the changes. And then Wednesday put together kind of a full roster projection with a couple, projected signings who I felt like fit given kind of what the Vikings could look for. So please go check that out. This show, as always, is presented by First Resource Bank. That is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. Got branches all over the place, really care about the community. Incredible online banking platform, very good people, easy to set up an account. So please, First Resource Bank, go check them out. We appreciate their support. And with that, let's jump right into the very Packers heavy conversation with Matt Schneidman of The Athletic. All right, Matt, welcome back to the show. I wanted to wait to have you until after the Yankees finished and scored 7 runs. So hopefully we got that done for you.
You want to know what's funny? My dad's at the game today, so shout out my dad, since my childhood home is 45 minutes from Yankee Stadium.
I know he listens to the Alec Lewis Show all the time, so it's good.
He does. And I watch every single game in its entirety, every Yankee game. And I said, you know what? We can't score any runs. 6-game losing streak. I'm going to change it up. I'm going on a 1-day protest. So I didn't watch a single second of the game today, and they won.
I mean, so it's you. I mean, that's what you get. Honestly,
it might be. It might be me.
I've said here, I was like on the radio local, and we'll get to Packer stuff very shortly here because people aren't listening for Yankees content. But I was on radio locally, and I said the one thing that people aren't talking enough about. And at the time, Aaron Judge was hitting like 397, and now it might be down to like 383 or something, which is still asinine. But it's like, I literally think nationally people haven't talked enough about like how special what he's been doing is. I like, as someone who covered baseball and who knows how difficult pitching is to hit right now, and who sees the numbers that this guy's put up, I can't even fathom the possibility. So,
it's insane. I still haven't read the Wright Thompson story on Aaron Judge. It's literally in my tabs, and I have to do that. But, yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible watching the guy. And he was, 2 for his last 21 in the last week. And everyone's like, oh, my God. But any other player that happens to, and it's like, oh, that's just baseball. But for him, you expect him to get 2 hits every single night.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you'll like the Wright Thompson story. He tells the history of like the underground beneath Yankee Stadium and the river. I don't even understand how he would have found his way to that subject, but that's that guy and how he does his job.
Yeah.
I want to start here. So, like here locally, all of the conversation, everything that people want to know, how is JJ McCarthy looking? What's he gonna, how's he gonna look come training camp? What are the expectations for him come the season? In Packers land, partly because I haven't followed it very closely because my job is to cover the Vikings. Like, I would wonder what is the subject there that everyone's asking about, people want to talk about, like priority one. What is that right now in Packers land?
Well, for the past 5 months, it's been Jair Alexander, and it hasn't been for the last week since he's gone, and we can move on from that. I think right now, it still might be a little bit of the lingering questions about the cornerback room because they're not bringing in any other reinforcements. I don't want to say they haven't brought in anybody. They signed Nate Hobbs to a 4-year, $48 million deal in free agency, and he's going to start, whether it's at nickel or on the outside. But there is a lot of, I would say, angst about the cornerback position right now. If I think I have my finger accurately on the pulse of the fan base, and I would like to think I do. So Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Nate Hobbs are your top three, and Brian Gutekunst sounds very confident in that top three. If I'm a fan, I'm not confident at all in that top three, especially if you have to face Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson twice a year, and Jordan Addison, obviously. And the Packers also have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison Jr., DK Metcalf on the schedule. Like, it's an insane gauntlet of receivers they face this year, and I just don't know. I could be completely wrong. Keyshawn Nixon can shove it in my face, but I'm just not as confident in the Packers cornerback room as those inside the building seem to be. Other than that, I just think the general idea of can Jordan Love get back to what he was the second half of 2023. And I said wherever I was talking or writing after that 2023 season, when he had from week 11 through the first round of the playoffs when they beat the Cowboys, Jordan Love threw 21 touchdowns and 1 interception.
That was insane.
He was playing alongside Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott that year, whether it's EPA or whatever numbers you look at. He was an MVP caliber quarterback the second half of that season. That kind of unfairly set the bar pretty darn high for year two. Sprains his MCL week 1 in Brazil. Can never really get back into a full practicing rhythm until week 11, I think it was. Receivers, they rank like 29th in the league in drops. Some of Jordan's quote-unquote regression, which those inside the building would not say it was a regression, I'm just saying statistically a little bit it was. Some of it was his own doing. His footwork was sloppy, some bad decision-making. But he's got to stay healthy. His receivers got to catch the ball. And I think you're going to see a quarterback who is top 10 in this league. I said it this way to someone earlier this offseason. I would put Jordan Love probably the 12th best quarterback in the league right now. Half the league would kill to have Jordan Love as their quarterback. If you're wondering if a guy is your franchise quarterback, or not if he's your franchise quarterback, but if you should be happy with him as your quarterback, think about how many teams would do anything to have him as their quarterback. The New York the New York Giants would. I'm just like listing teams off the top of my head. The New Orleans Saints would. The Carolina Panthers, they're probably high on Bryce Young, but the Las Vegas Raiders would. The Seattle Seahawks probably would, even though Sam Darnold had a great year last year. Like, you get my point. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but the Cleveland Browns obviously would. Like, half the league, if not more, would want to have Jordan Love, but I still think a talking point around here is fans wanting him to take an even bigger step to be a quarterback they can win because of, not just be, and he is that already, but last year he was more so a quarterback they could win with, but that's also because they ran the ball more than they ever had under Matt LaFleur, so he didn't have to, put so much on Jordan Love's shoulders like they did in 2023.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you start first with the cornerbacks, because as I was going through my, speed prep, knowing that I was going to talk to you, and I read the names to myself, the Nate Hobbs, the Keyshawn Nixons, the Carrington Valentines, I was like star underline, like this is something I want to talk to you about because
Mm-hmm.
of the receivers that this team has. But let's I mean, the Jordan Love thing, I did wonder how people there have felt about it, what people have said. Like before this podcast, I went and looked. Since 2022, 44 NFL quarterbacks have thrown 500 pass attempts. And Jordan Love ranks 7th in EPA per dropback behind Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, Tua, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love. And a lot of, I think, those numbers, probably a major driver of them was that second half of the season in 2023. But I myself, like when I watch him, there are times I'm like, this guy with the arm talent, with the athleticism, like it's as dynamic as it gets. And there are other times where it's like, man, it does feel very sloppy. So it's interesting to hear you kind of describe it the way you do, but it sounds like the way you're talking, like that people internally very much believe that with a runway of this entire offseason and health that he did not have early last year, that he can build off kind of that foundation.
Absolutely. And Matt LaFleur said it publicly. They got to get the footwork cleaned up. And here's a note for Vikings fans. Tom Clements was the quarterback coach for Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love. He's retired. Sean Mannion is Jordan Love's quarterback coach now. He is the Packers quarterback coach, Vikings legend. I know Bill Huber, who covers the Packers for the SI affiliate here, did a story on Sean Mannion and talked to Kirk Cousins, and Kirk was just gushing about how good Sean Mannion was for him. Yeah, and so I think that'll be good for Jordan. Like I said, there was a lot that he couldn't control last year that affected his play. I'm looking at his stats right now, just the basic stats, not the advanced stats. 2023, completion percentage, 64.2. 2024, 63.1, so the same. 2023, passing yards, 41.59. 2024, 33.89. So about 750 fewer passing yards, but he also played in 3 fewer games because of injury. Missed 2 games completely. I think he missed half of Week 18 against the Bears, and then there was he might have missed 2.5 games. So,
sure.
About equal. Touchdowns, 25 in 2024, 32 in 2023. So he would have had a couple more if he had played. And like I said, they had Josh Jacobs. I love Aaron Jones. When I saw Aaron Jones at a charity event the week of the draft here in Green Bay, he was with some PR people who were walking him around, and he got away from them and came and gave me a big bear hug. You won't find anyone who likes Aaron Jones more than I do, but Josh Jacobs is, more durable. He's more of a workhorse, but not that Aaron Jones wasn't, and he's still productive, but Josh Jacobs can handle more. So they put more on Josh Jacobs' plate, so that's why maybe you're not seeing Jordan Love throw as many touchdowns. 11 interceptions in both seasons. He had a higher passer rating in 2024 than 2023. So that's why Matt LaFleur offered a passionate defense of Jordan Love this offseason against the notion that he had regressed. He was like, I don't think he regressed. I remember when I did my podcast with LaFleur last year, this was deep into the second half of the season, he said, Jordan's playing the best football he's played. I said, this season or his whole career? He said, his whole career. Just because his numbers don't, flash all the time doesn't mean he's not playing well. I know the term game manager isn't popular and it diminishes a quarterback's in a sense, but Jordan was doing everything they asked of him until those last couple games of the season and into the playoffs. But another thing is their pass protection wasn't as good. Jordan Love this is the last thing I'll say. I know I'm rambling on here, but Jordan Love is really good at avoiding sacks under pressure. There's a play against the Lions in Week 14 where I think it was Jack Campbell is unblocked. Jordan Love sidesteps him somehow and throws the prettiest pass you'll ever see to Christian Watson for a 30-yard gain down the left sideline. And, his sack percentage numbers on True Media are really good, top 3, top 4 in the league. But if you watch the games, pass protection's not that good. That's why the Packers went and dropped a Brinks truck on Aaron Banks, the 49ers left guard in free agency. That's why they let Josh Myers walk and are moving their 2-time Pro Bowl left guard, Elton Jenkins, to center. Zach Tom, a perennial Pro Bowler, is at right tackle. Jordan Morgan, their first-round pick from last year, is probably going to start at right guard, and Rasheed Walker, who's been a solid left tackle for them, is going to be their left tackle. So they had to make some moves on that offensive line to shore things up. They think Jordan Love is a guy who can win them a Super Bowl. They just got to get everything around him right.
Yeah, I mean, the Banks move, I mean, this is a Vikings team that overhauled the interior of the offensive line. And so here locally, as like I scanned the market or looked at who was possible, Banks was a name that came up. I don't know if I expected Aaron Banks to net the type of contract that he did there, but it sounds like, obviously it does, they showed how much they seemingly believe that he can provide for them. What did you make of that level of contract?
Yeah, it was interesting because, you don't really hear about Aaron Banks as a type of offensive lineman that is an all-pro caliber guy, but talking to Matt Barrows, who covers the 49ers for us, he can move. He's a big son of a gun. I think he's like maybe 6'4", 336 or something around there. And it kind of leans into the style of running that Josh Jacobs has. Aaron Jones is more of a slasher, a cutter. Josh Jacobs is pound the rock downhill. And if you got big boys up front like Aaron Banks, and they drafted the NC State left tackle Anthony Belton, who's like 6'6", 336 in the second round this year, who's probably going to be their left tackle of the future if I had to guess. That's some big son of a guns up there. So I would say Aaron Banks kind of, they signed him to really lean into that running style. But also, you will always hear Packers coaches say we want to get the best five on the offensive line. Josh Myers started the last 4 years for them at center. They had no intention of bringing him back. So they move Elton Jenkins to center. They say, what's going to be our best five? They don't just go out and overpay for a center. And who knows? They might have overpaid for Banks. We'll find out. But they don't go out and overpay for a center. They say, you know what? I think our best five would probably be moving Jenkins to center, because Elton Jenkins played center at Mississippi State before they drafted him in 2019, the second round. That was his best position coming out.
Interesting.
So they even though he's made 2 Pro Bowls at left guard, so they move him there, say, you know what, Banks is left guard, so maybe Elton Jenkins is better at left guard, but the best unit together, that's what they think they have. We'll see if they're right. Scotty Scheffler, Eagles, another hole. Good Lord. Now tied for the lead. I have $200 on Scotty Scheffler, plus 280 to win the Travelers this week, and he's tied for first, 13 holes in.
Yeah, that's unbelievable that you're betting with that kind of odds on a guy. I mean,
they're ridiculous odds.
Yeah, now he's as much of a guarantee as there is, but I mean, it's an absurd. I mean, you're not netting the return. That's why with the U.S. Open at Oakmont, I'm like, yeah, Shane Lowry plus 3,300, and then he shoots 8 over on the first day, and you understand why he's plus 3,300. You mentioned Banks and his run blocking ability, and I think part of my curiosity, and you talked about how much they ran the ball last year, and so much we talked last year throughout the course of the season when we previewed some of those games, like Adam Stinovich, their offensive coordinator, have the utmost respect for. I thought some of their run game designs was as creative in the league, and you saw how effective they were on the ground on a weekly basis. But part of me wondered at the time, like, are they running the ball more because they're leaning into the personnel? Are they running the ball more to take some of the pressure off Jordan Love? Are they running the ball more because in this era of the game with how defenses are playing them, this is the approach that you kind of have to take to maximize your percentage at success? Like, do you feel like they were in some ways, leaning into that to provide Jordan Love kind of a runway coming back from the injury? Like, how did you think about the increase of run usage, run effectiveness, like the commitment to the run game last year in Green Bay?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and who knows? Look, early on in the season, I think leaning on that was because they didn't have Jordan Love. The game that I think illustrates most what Stinovich can do and why he's probably a future play-calling offensive coordinator in this league, which he's not in Green Bay. He even got a head coaching interview with the Bears this offseason. Is that game they played against the Colts in week 2 when Malik Willis, 19 days into his tenure with the Packers, was the starting quarterback after Jordan sprained his MCL in week 1. And just some of the stuff, some of the misdirections, some of the turns by the quarterback, different looks in the backfield, whether it's what the Packers call pony when they have 2 guys lined up in the backfield on either side of the quarterback, or just, I formation, whatever it is. They got really creative, and they had to then, because Malik Willis was a guy that they didn't know if they could trust him to air it out.
Sure.
It came to be they could. So I think some of it was Josh Jacobs could take more of the workload. Some of it was, early on it would just wear defenses down, and then that opens up other stuff. So like you said, against the Seahawks, for example, in Week 15, I think the Packers had a 10-play touchdown drive to open the game, and Josh Jacobs touched the ball on 9 of the plays. Like, sometimes it's strategically like that, where it's like, okay, it's working, let's set a tone. Let's pound the rock, and maybe it'll open stuff up later in the game. Other times, it might be something they see schematically in opposing defenses. I don't think just because you pay your quarterback $55 million a year, you have to say, okay, throw the ball 40 times a game every game.
Yeah.
I think you pay him $55 million a year because if you need him to put the team on his back, he can. And I think Jordan Love is still a guy who can do that. An interesting stat, I will say, and I think this is another reason they kind of retooled their offensive line. This is off the top of my head. These numbers are estimations because I've looked up this stat before. I think Josh Jacobs ranked in the 29 to 33, somewhere in there, in yards before contact per rush, with less than 1. It was near the bottom of the league in terms of starting running backs, with 0.97. Yards after contact per rush, he was top 5 or 6 with over 3. So to me, that says the offensive linemen aren't giving Josh Jacobs enough space, but he's able to generate yards after contact himself. So Josh Jacobs is really – and Aaron Jones was the same way. Josh Jacobs is a guy that needs more space to run the ball probably, but when he's given little space, he can make stuff happen after contact, which is another reason they kept feeding him and another reason I think they kind of reconfigured their O-line this offseason.
No question. Let's circle to defense, and I'll wrap it and kind of put a bow on the cornerback room. But I remember, leading into the draft, at The Athletic, we do a lot of these. We call them all 32s. We fill in, what position is your team probably going to target in the draft? And, I'm always, I'll look across the document before I fill mine out. And I felt and you correct me if I'm wrong, with, Green Bay, it was a lot of, interior defensive line, or maybe not even interior, but edge rushing help, pass rush.
Yeah.
It's felt and I we've talked about this over probably the last year, Green Bay and the pass rush has been a conversation that people there have had. So, obviously they ended up drafting Matthew Golden, the receiver, in the first round. They may have taken an edge rusher or someone on the front later on throughout the draft whose name is escaping me. But how do you feel? How do people there feel about where the pass rush is given where it's been?
Skeptical, I would say. They had a couple games last season. They had 8 sacks against the Titans, I think, 7 sacks against the Seahawks, but then it was very inconsistent otherwise. That's a word Brian Gutekunst used when describing the pass rush after the season, inconsistent. Jason Rebrovich, their D-line coach, was fired after the season. That's how, inconsistent and underwhelming their pass rush was. Matt LaFleur has told us since then that when the season started last year, he thought they were just going to rush a traditional 4, be able to generate pressure that way, but they couldn't, so they had to shift. And Jeff Hafley kind of schemed up what they call simulated pressures. So they crowd 7 guys at the line of scrimmage, drop a defensive lineman into coverage, and blitz a safety or a linebacker. So it looks like a blitz because a safety or a linebacker is coming, but you're still only rushing 4. So it allows you to maintain your coverage integrity while maybe throwing confusing the offensive line because you're sending Xavier McKinney off the edge or Edgerrin Cooper in the B gap or whatever it is. That was able to generate pressure, but it just wasn't consistent enough. And they didn't do anything at that position this offseason, at least in their top 4. They drafted Barron Sorrell out of Texas in the 4th round, but their top 4 of Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, their not 2013 first-round pick. I have the number 13 in my head since he was the 13th pick. 2023 number 13 overall pick. Brenton Cox, Kingsley Enagbare. Brian Gutekunst was very adamant this offseason that he's confident in the guys they had in that room. So couple that with them firing the position coach, to me, that says the Packers think they have the guys, just not the right coaching in that position room. So will it improve? I don't know. But they need a guy like Lucas Van Ness to start playing like a first-round pick, because a lot of times when Rashawn Gary goes missing, and it'll happen in stretches, the coach says, "Oh, are you seeing all the double teams and chips and thumps that he gets?" Well, an easy way to free him up from those is by getting other guys to play better, and that starts and ends with Lucas Van Ness. Kenny Clark, another guy who I know Viking fans are familiar with because of how he's tormented Garrett Bradbury over the years, is, Kenny revealed to us just a couple weeks ago that he basically broke his toe in Brazil in week 1 and just played through it the whole season.
Couldn't believe that when I read it. I couldn't believe it.
It's probably not like it doesn't absolve him of any blame, because he had his worst season of his career from a production standpoint since his rookie year when he didn't start. So here's a 3-time Pro Bowler who has, I think, 1 sack all year and like a couple tackles for loss, and he's not doing anything from a pass rush perspective. So he's healthy. He got surgery after the season. I was saying this on an earlier podcast I was on today, but you can have a mediocre cornerback room if you have a great pass rush. You can have a mediocre pass rush if you have a great cornerback room. There are a lot of questions around both for the Packers right now.
Yeah, I think the people listening to this, when you said Kenny Clark and Garrett Bradbury, probably like felt warmth in their soul, knowing that the center this season is Ryan Kelly as part of the overall interior of the offensive line. So that's right. People are like, "Oh, I forgot that's what it feels like to have a center that we can trust more in this this spot." But what you just said, I mean, to me, and again, this is like my total outsider view, as I was going through some of the prep for this, and I went down the depth chart and the roster of this Packers defense. Like, I have the utmost respect for a Rashawn Gary and a Kenny Clark, and I've always thought positively of Devontae Wyatt and potentially Lucas Van Ness development. And Edgerrin Cooper was incredible last year. Xavier McKinney, Alabama guy. I'm biased to really like him. But as I went through it, and I know what we've talked about from a front perspective last year, and I looked at the cornerback names that we started this podcast with, I was thinking, like, man, this feels like you're placing a lot on Jeff Hafley to be creative enough to kind of make it work. And maybe that's just, I'm not seeing it as clearly as the people inside that building, and that would be very apparent because I'm just a nerd in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and look, Kevin O'Connell would tell you this. I think Kevin O'Connell and Jeff Hafley were neighbors when they were both on Cleveland's coaching staff.
Yeah,
very
close.
Very, very close. Jeff Hafley's a DB specialist. He was the DB coach for the 49ers before he went to be the co-defensive coordinator for Ohio State. The year Chase Young and Jeff Okudah were first-round picks. And then he was obviously the head coach at Boston College. He's a DB guy at his core. So if there's anybody who can make this DB room work, I think it's Jeff Hafley. Now the Packers are practicing a wide receiver at corner. We'll see if he is able to contribute to some depth there. But they're rolling with Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Nate Hobbs in whatever kind of alignment back there, for better or for worse. And then they're going to need to, be able to generate pressure with 4. They lost in the playoffs to the Eagles, in part because the Eagles are just able to send a traditional 4 and get home and drop, 7 in coverage, rush 4. And they win their one-on-ones. They get home. That's what the Packers want to do on defense. But they weren't able to do that this year. Will they be able to do it this year? We're about to find out. If they can, Jeff Hafley might be a head coach somewhere next year.
It's a good point. And you said this early, but like Nate Hobbs, Nate Hobbs, I'll say this for the people listening to this, like the Vikings, I know, like Nate Hobbs in free agency, had Byron Murphy Jr. not re-sign for the hefty deal that he ended up re-signing. Like Nate Hobbs was a guy who was squarely on their radar, so it'll be interesting to kind of just follow and see how he performs in Green Bay. But does it sound? I mean, like Keyshawn Nixon, he's probably primarily been a nickel. Is he gonna kind of shift to outside, and then they'll have Nate Hobbs at nickel? Like what? I mean, you probably don't know that for sure yet, but
no, Keyshawn's playing outside. Yeah, okay. Keyshawn basically traditional nickel, but he played more outside last year, and that's where he's playing this year. If anyone's going to play inside at nickel, it's going to be Nate Hobbs. You know, Valentine's an outside guy. They also have Javon Bullard, who they drafted in the second round last year, who started as the starting safety alongside McKinney, but then Evan Williams, who they drafted in the fourth round last year out of Oregon, he was like the star of camp, and then once he got more playing time during the season, they said, no, he's better at safety, so they played Bullard at the nickel, and then Valentine and Nixon on the outside when Jair was hurt, and Jair and Nixon on the outside when he wasn't hurt. This year, I don't want to say they have an embarrassment of riches, but they have some more depth and more flexibility because Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney are your two starting safeties. Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Valentine are your outside corners. So does that mean Nate Hobbs plays outside and Javon Bullard is at the nickel because he's a second-round pick last year and played fine last year? Or do you have Nate Hobbs at the nickel and Valentine on the outside? Like we were talking about with the offensive line, you know, it's your best five.
Right.
It's whatever your best five is. The Packers aren't wed to like, okay, we need to get this guy on the field or this guy on the field. It's like, which five give us the best chance to win? It's cliche, but it's how they operate. And that could mean your 2024 second-round pick who got a lot of playing time last year being on the bench.
Yeah. To round it out, like before we hopped on, the over-under for the Packers win total, I think, is around 9.5. Is that what you've got too?
Yeah.
At that number, like, what do you think of that number just with the roster that you know of? And then I guess, like, in tandem with that question, like, and I know who I'm asking about in terms of the organization, the success that they've had, but, like, what is, like, reasonable expectation? What do Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, like, need to get done this year if there is, like, a benchmark?
Yeah, I'm fighting back a sneeze since my allergies are absolutely kicking my ass right now. That's why you see me scrunching my eyes and my nose.
Thought
so
Scheffler
we sat down,
and you're just like, you're emotional about it.
Ed Policy, who's taking over as Packers president in a couple weeks once Mark Murphy turns 70, sat down with local beat writers last week and said he's not extending Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst yet. They have 2 years left on their deals, so that's not out of the ordinary. I know some coaches got extensions with 2 years left, but Ed Policy is not doing that. He is going to make a decision after this coming season because he said he wants to avoid LaFleur and Gutekunst being in contract years. So I tend to think he's leaning toward extending them, but there's a chance that he's waiting to see if this year is good enough to make the decision of, okay, extend or fire. Are they the pair that's going to get us over the top to get us back to a Super Bowl? We'll see. So I don't exactly know where Ed is leaning on that. He's not involved in football decisions, Ed Policy, although he'll be in those discussions, but it's not ultimately his decision. His job is to oversee the head coach and general manager and evaluate them and hold them accountable, is what he said, along with Russ Ball, who's their cap guy and director of football ops. So what do they need to accomplish this season if their job status is up in the air? I think they got to at least make an NFC championship game because, yes, they have been the two youngest playoff teams by average age in the last 45 years are the 2023 Packers and the 2024 Packers. But this is year 3 of the Jordan Love era. This is year 7 of the Matt LaFleur era. I'm about to sneeze. This is year 8 of the Brian Gutekunst era.
At the total climax of the answer.
Yeah, my eyes are red now. This is year 8 of the Brian Gutekunst era. Like, youth is no longer an excuse. You got to make some noise this year, especially after last season when you went 1-5 in the division and 0-6 against the 3 teams in the NFC that were better than you, including a playoff loss to the Eagles. So, look, do I think they're going to make an NFC championship game? No. I think they'll make the playoffs as a wild card team again. But if they're just stuck in neutral, I wonder if Ed Policy is going to make drastic changes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know the Vikings have had success against the Packers, but if I'm not mistaken, since Kevin O'Connell took over, they're 4-2 against them, which was just interesting to kind of go through it. But I mean, you mentioned the expectations there. The people listening to this podcast, I mean, Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah both extended. They haven't won a playoff game. So for as much success, as they've had here, and for as great as 2 of the 3 seasons really have been, I mean, you get through 4 seasons without a playoff win, and then the conversation here, I mean, you start to have more pressurized conversations. So it's and then like Detroit, what are they going to be without their coordinators? Chicago, what are they going to be? It's just the dynamics in all of these buildings in this division. I'm not breaking ground here to say that they're interesting, but they really are.
I would say the biggest, like there are big question marks with every team beside the Packers. Obviously, there are questions around every team in the NFL, and the question around the Packers is, can the cornerback room hold up? Can Jordan Love, get back to what he was in 23, the second half of the season? But like, there are massive questions with every other team. With the Bears, it's like, Ben Johnson, can he make Caleb Williams consistently look like a number 1 pick and keep him upright? The Lions, can they continue their success without their coordinators? Vikings, is J.J. McCarthy any good? Like, there isn't that huge question with the Packers. So I don't want to say the Packers are the most sure thing. If by sure thing you mean 11-6 team that might make some noise in the playoffs, yeah, that's probably a safe bet. But like, there are a lot of uncertainties with the other 3 teams in the division, which I don't know if that's supposed to make Packer fans feel good or not, but I don't know, it might.
No, I mean, your point is right. Like, which team has head coach, GM, coordinator, quarterback continuity? And like, that's massive. It's just hugely important. I mean, obviously, the Vikings have Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores, and Kevin O'Connell here locally has lifted the floor of the offense, but it's a question mark at quarterback, the most important position on the field. And then Detroit, I mean, you and I would both agree about what Ben Johnson at minimum was for them, and probably the culture that Aaron Glenn instilled. So it's you're probably right in that. I mean, you can feel with the stability some semblance of comfort, and then I guess you see how things go from there. Matt, appreciate you hopping on as always. It was good to get kind of the pulse of the Packers. It's that time of year where I just feel like I gotta know what's going on. So that was part and parcel, and hopefully the people listening to this got something out of it, and let you go, pay attention to the bet that you made on a very
nose and watch golf.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's a very tough evening for you.
I got a couple more weeks till I feel like I have to know what's going on around the division. I'm taking 3 weeks of PTO, so don't ask me to come on your podcast the next 3 weeks.
No, I won't. Not until the Vikings play the Packers at some point during the season. I heard that's happening. So thanks, Matt. We'll talk soon, man.
Thanks, Alec. Yep.
And that'll do it for episode 92 of the Alec Lewis Show. Always appreciate folks taking some time out of their afternoon, and today it was Matt, so appreciate him hopping on and giving us the rundown from Packers land. You talk to the beat writers across the industry. It's always interesting to kind of get the feel of how of their lens of the team and some of the history dynamics. I mean, I just know from the work that I and the experience that I've had here locally, like, you get to see it all, and you obviously talk to people behind the scenes, so it's always a good perspective. And while that may have been very Packers heavy for you guys, hope you took something out of it, gives you a perspective going into this into training camp and the season about how the enemy is viewing things from across the border. So appreciate Matt hopping on. Just like we said at the top, check out some stories at The Athletic. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Rate, review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or any of that. Please, open an account with First Resource Bank. It's a bank in the local community that really cares about the community. So recommend You can find branches all over the place. The information for First Resource is in the description below. That'll do it for this week. We'll be back next week with more. Trying to, line up some guests, some more national folks for the coming weeks. But enjoy the weekend. The weather is phenomenal. Get out on the golf course if you're doing that. Good luck swinging it. We will talk to you guys very, very soon. That'll do it for episode 92 of the Alec Lewis Show.